Hello everyone, Santier here, and welcome to a life and channel update for February 2022. I did one of these in January and had always been kind of intending to do one in February, and then I kind of forgot about it until like a couple days ago, and then didn't have a good opportunity to do it yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and record it now, and last time, just let's do some quick updates. I want to get to a document that I worked on, but I want to kind of catch up on some of the things that I've been discussing last time. So one of them was that I had been, or I'd made the decision to stop streaming because I wanted to figure out what my life looked like without streaming. And one of the things that I realized at that time is that I don't want to be a full-time streamer. What I want to do is I want to make video games. Like that's kind of the big thing that I want to do. And like streaming was taking up a day, and was it really worth it? What would my life look like without streaming? So I took, I'm still on in many regards, a hiatus from streaming, and I really, frankly, liked having my Saturdays back. I liked having that time as an additional day to be able to work on my game, and that's something that means that, like, for sure, like a day stream like that not coming back. I do want to bring streaming back somehow at some point in some way. Probably it'll be in the evening my time, although other life circumstances may kind of adjust how some of that may go. We might touch on that a little bit later. So yeah, I want to stream again because I enjoy streaming, but I also am like, where does this fit in? And if I do it, it would be like after supper, in the evening, so like 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, which is GMT minus 8 or 7, depending upon whether or not we're on daylight saving time. So that would be like the earliest it would start, and it'd be for like only a couple of hours at most. So we'll see. Again, it's something that I want to bring back, but no definite plans on that just yet. If you have been following the channel, you will notice that there has been an Ocarina of Time series that's been going up. I need to figure out a new style of thumbnail for it. I feel like all of my intuitions about marketing have proven to be wrong. So I liked the thumbnail style. I liked having the guacamole. Let me grab one here. Yeah, one of these guys representing me, and an owl for my sister. I thought that was really neat. I liked the title Cientier and Sister because of the like alliteration and overall word shapes being kind of similar. But I think I need to do something different with the thumbnail to make it a little bit clearer. Like I have the manuals, the instruction booklets for the games, but I just don't think that people can really tell what's going on with them. So I need to figure out marketing. Like one of the big things I've been trying to do in January is I've just been trying to figure out how to market the stuff that I am doing better. And that's still an ongoing process. I'm going to discuss sort of like January overall was a reassessment month for me. And so I'm going to discuss sort of that reassessment process. OBS, I don't know. I don't know. Technology is. I had an observation the other day that people who are like really tech oriented always expect something to go wrong with technology. So if everything works perfectly, they get really nervous because they're like, "Where's the problem?" And then people who aren't as like technologically oriented kind of wanted everything to work perfectly, so they get frustrated by problems. So my problem here is when I switch scenes to go to the desktop scene where I have this notepad document, because I like to think a notepad, the webcam decides, oh, I'm not going to be there for that scene, so I have to like toggle the activation to get it show up. So, and there. Okay. So as you can see, I have my desktop here with my nice logo, but we have this document that I called self-assessment, and you can see I have dated it for January 13th. So, there's a bunch of different things here. We're just going to kind of go over it, and I'm going to discuss these. This is going to give you where I'm currently at mentally, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each of these. But this is kind of what I want to be doing right here. I want to create games and stories about which people can think deeply. That is what I want to do with the vast bulk of my time. So then I had, okay, what are the things that I'm currently doing? So I'm working on, PAM is just the abbreviations for Psychopomps Are Missing. That is a working title. I don't want to be boxed in like the poor people who made Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy. And then they're like, hey, this is our working title. And then they just are like, well, this is what everybody knows it by. I guess we're going to stick with it. I don't want to do that. I've toyed around a little bit with some actual potential names. One that I like is Yoda the Last Psychopomp. I really enjoyed The Last Unicorn as a kid, and so having a title that kind of calls back to that is something that tickles my fancy. But this is kind of like the big thing that I'm doing, spending most of my time doing, is I'm working on Psychopomps Are Missing. If you want to get, I don't know, I've been trying to figure out how to order things in this video. If you want to have like the in detail view of what's going on with that, like I do post quarterly reports on my blog at santier.com about what's going on in Psychopomps Are Missing and like how close I am to completion. Spoilers, I'm pretty far from completion. But if you want to like get the regular details, I have a Patreon, and I would like that to get up to $300 per month. I'll get more into that later. But on that Patreon, I have like this is one of the other things that I did in January is I streamlined my Patreon and just trying to figure out what's important. You may have seen on my channel the Patreon podcast as like some videos I was doing for a while. That was actually something just to kind of back up a little bit and give some. I'm somebody who like over explains things because I want to make sure people have context, because I know context is really important for framing stuff and understanding things. So I started my Patreon back in like the tail end of 2017. I guess it was. And so at that time, I was trying to figure out what sort of rewards can I give people that would make my Patreon feel valuable to them. So at that time, I'd set up what I called my Patron Podcast. Not a super original feeling title, but it was the idea, because people love voting on topics or whatever. So the idea was that patrons could submit topics and vote on them and choose that way, like what was the Patron podcast going to be about. But it never really was that meaningful to the people who signed up to it at that time, because like at this point, everybody who's on my Patreon is like, for the most part, friends or family, like people who know me directly. But additionally, like there's like, I'm not going to get into too much on the demographic breakdown, but most of the people supporting my own Patreon are friends and family, and anybody else can just contact me on Discord or whatever if they wanted to know something. So it kind of wasn't, it didn't have good participation, even among the patrons I do have. And so it was something that I decided as I was doing some of this reassessment process, this doesn't really have a place. And so I axed it. So at this point, my Discord has 2 tiers, a $1 tier USD. I always want to include the units on that sort of thing because I know different countries use dollars, and I want to try to be internationally minded as much as I can. Anyway, $1 USD is the access tier that gets you access to my ridiculously huge archive of different random things I've tried. Like I tried some really short stories I called vignettes. I tried some song stuff. I'm not a trained musician or anything. I just like playing on a keyboard. And so there's a bunch of those that I did for a while. The whole archive of 50 patron podcasts and stuff. So there's a bunch of stuff on there, plus a special area on my Discord. There is a link to my Discord in the description, by the way. So that gets you access to those. And then at $5 is the Dear, again, USD, is the Dear Diary tier, where I do a Dear Patrons like daily diary entry. And so in those, I'll like discuss what's going on in my day, what sort of things am I thinking about, and I'll talk about like what stuff have I done in Psychopomps Are Missing. Or like what articles am I writing on, what other projects am I working on, those sorts of things will come up as well. As well as musings about future plans and stuff. So if you really want to be like up to date on what's going on in Psychopomps Are Missing, that's the place to do it. Like that's at that $5 tier is where you get access to much more regular information. It is very like detailed and like close level in terms of it's not big picture oriented. It's what am I focused on right now. But yeah, that is like by far the best way to keep up on what's going on. I do sometimes also tweet out things that I'm doing. So twitter.com/Santier. I'm very consistent about being Santier around the internet. But I will, from time to time, also tweet out some things there. Like I tweeted recently some stuff about some user interface things that I had done in the game. So anyway, Psychopomps Are Missing, kind of my big focus and priority at the moment. and that's where you can get some more ongoing information about it. I may look into doing some YouTube videos similar-ish to Astro Collision on it, but I need to look through some policies. We will discuss why in a bit, though, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Writing articles on my blog. That's one of the things that I'm doing. Dear patrons, which I already mentioned, but this is the daily diary entries, so this is kind of important. And then tweeting. Again, I feel like one of the struggles that I'm trying to find the solution to, or one of the things I'm trying to work through, is how do I grow my audience? How do I connect with people who would like the stuff that I'm doing? And Twitter is kind of how I'm trying to approach that. I'm trying to figure out like how do I? I'm like just trying to be very raw and honest here. It's a very difficult, challenging process to figure out how to market yourself on social media. There is this, like, I don't quite understand how the ecosystem works is part of it. And there's something more for me to be learning there about how to get connected to people. But one of the other things that like always kind of goes in the back of my mind is these social media companies are financially motivated and incentivized to not promote people's stuff. Like, they have reason to share things that they think will keep people engaged. So they have kind of like this dual thing where they want to provide content that'll keep people engaged, but anything that's actual like self-promotion, they would rather suppress unless you give them money, right? Because that's part of their revenue model is selling advertising. And so why would they give away free advertising, right? So that's something that's I'm always thinking about is like, how do I actually promote my stuff in a way that gets through the algorithms? Because they have an incentive to make the algorithm say, if they haven't paid to have this promoted, don't show it to people. So I don't quite know how any of that sort of back end works. I just am thinking through the human psychology. Like, algorithms are not, there's a little bit of a magic, but they're made with the intention of achieving certain outcomes. So like, there are kind of like black boxes to some regards, but they're black boxes built around a specific purpose. So that human incentive, that human motivation is going to drive certain factors, and they're also built on like inputs. So human nature also modifies those inputs, and that can cause a lot of problems. But anyway, I'm kind of getting beyond the point. And then we have various videos that I'm doing on this channel. So JJ is a pet name for my sister. So I have the Legend of Zelda series with her that I'm doing. I have heard really good things from the people who have watched them that I know. They've said that my sister and I have really good chemistry and that they've really been enjoying them. I think people will overall like the series. There are definitely some technical issues. We had some problems with the commentary recordings cutting out at a few points here and there, particularly at the start of recording sessions, which is unfortunate, just kind of how it goes with like any sort of experimental thing. Video quality is somewhat limited. We're using a device that we'd gotten to digitize VHS tapes. So that device has like some quirks. We do want to like I don't have a proper capture card or anything, which is something that I would kind of theoretically like to get at some point in time. But anyway, so we're capturing with that device, so it's limited to 480p. That's just the resolution that we get off of it. I think that's fine. I think it's enjoyable enough. I enjoy, like, I've been editing those and kind of going through, and that's usually what I spend my Tuesdays doing, for those curious, is editing those. And that's mostly just watching them. And for some reason, there's a slight desync between the video and the commentary track. So I keep having to like slightly shift every now and then the commentary track to keep lined up with the game, which is like not... It's not that bad. It means that I'm mostly just watching the episode and slightly tweaking things. But I enjoy watching them back. I do wish, like, there's all sorts of things like, okay, we have this microphone that we're working with and trying, like, my sister's holding it and trying to keep it positioned between us. So audio can be a little bit wonky, and I know that's kind of a big deal. But overall, like, I enjoyed it, and we want to continue with Majora's Mask and get through Skyward Sword, which is the games that we have on the three colored plugin types. I want to call it component because I'm like, oh, there's 3 different components, but I don't actually know what it is. And I made comment of it on Twitter, and somebody told me, oh, it's actually this thing, and I'm not keeping track, but I know what they look like, and I know what they plug into. So that series, the Ocarina of Time series, has been something that I think was a lot of fun to record, and has been really neat. And we're looking forward to Majora's Mask a lot. If anybody who has watched that series will know that my sister is quite fond of Majora's Mask. So, and I'll be excited to eventually get to Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, which will be the GameCube version because that's the one that I have, and eventually Skyward Sword. So, I do want to do a Dark Souls trilogy retrospective. My plan right now is to begin working on that in earnest after we've finished the Ocarina of Time series. So the next editing session for that on this coming Tuesday will be the last one, and then the episodes are going out on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So at that point, I want to begin like working on this in terms of like right now. What I've done is I have a Google Doc that's just a big like outline of here are all of the like categories and bullet points and stuff, and it's lengthy. But this is going to be looking at stuff across the entire trilogy. I've mentioned this off and on, but the Dark Souls 2 retrospective series that I did a couple years ago has like been gaining traction in the algorithm for reasons that are beyond me. I find a lot of those analytics they tell me a lot of information, but not the fundamental questions of why is this catching people's attention now? Like, what's different about this one? Like, I go and look at the number of views for some of my Guild Wars VODs, and it's like, this one randomly has, an order of magnitude more views than the other ones. I'm like, but why? Right? And it's that but why that I feel like analytics do an extremely poor job of actually answering. So anyway, once I finish the Zelda series, I want to start working, because I like working on Psychopomps Are Missing 4 days a week, and then having another day where and Tuesday tends to be a little bit shorter day for me anyway, but having another day where I can kind of work on some other stuff. So I want to start working on that Dark Souls trilogy retrospective at that point. And I have some ideas how to do it. This Ocarina of Time series has actually been really useful for like getting more familiar. I use DaVinci Resolve for video editing because it's got a free version, and I just recently figured out how to keyframe like position and stuff with images. So that's really exciting. Like, I'm familiar with the concept, but I wasn't trying to do it in Resolve, and I'm like, I really want to do this, so I poked around enough to figure it out. It wasn't hard, but so anyway, this is how my brain works. I get sidetracked all the time. So anyway, I want to start working on that soonish. I can also do random one-off videos if I want to. Yay. So these are like things that I'm doing. So then what I did is I looked at things that I'm passionate about. So what I did for this, just to kind of set expectations, this is in no particular order, but just things that I feel passionate about, and then what is my response going to be to it. This is a notepad, so its formatting is a little limited, and I have word wrap on, and I've bumped up the font size, so some of these are going to word wrap a little bit. That's just how it's going to go. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer update video, I can tell already, because we're about 20 minutes in, and we're at this point. So game design and creation, this is something that I am very excited about, very passionate about. So this is something that I can write about. So there's a couple of different ways in which I engage in this topic in general. One of them obviously is making a game. I'm working on Psychopomps Are Missing. Writing stuff on my blog, or like tweeting random thoughts and stuff about game design. One of the other ones is doing a podcast series about game design. So before, I'm mostly an indie game developer at this point, where I'm like by myself, a solo indie game developer. But before that, I worked with a small indie studio called Vernacular Games. And like we made one game, Highway to the Moon. There is a dev play on my YouTube channel if you really want to dig it up and see what it's about. There's a lot of cool things that we did in it. You can shoot the dialogue. It's fun. But its art style was unfortunately somewhat inconsistent, and marketing is basically on wow them with art, it feels like, and that's just not what that game could do. So yeah, it didn't sell particularly well, and has some annoying bugs that just are not fixable, but in terms of like how it handles some of the game, like extreme game over stuff, which is unfortunate, but I think the game had a lot of neat ideas. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So with one of the guys there who goes by Redcoat, at least in our podcasts, we did a series of podcasts talking about game design, which is a very academic series. You can find them on the Vernacular Games YouTube channel. I'll try to remember to include a link to that in the description. But yeah, I really liked that series. We did 2 seasons of it. The first one's audio is better. The second one was a scripting nightmare where it just took forever to get it finished. We're currently planning a third one. Hopefully Redcoat's okay with me saying that, but that's something that I'm doing to engage in game design stuff, and then just engage in game creation. That's what this is about. Video games in general. So this is something where I can talk about, like I can write about them. I can engage in like playing video games, make videos on games sometimes, stream sometimes. So a lot of this starts going in, as you can see, sex ed is the next one. There's a lot of like sexuality things that I'm passionate about, and this is something that causes me a lot of like anxiety, I guess is the best word. Let me put frame of mind. Like, I think sexuality and like the human body are really fascinating and really interesting things, and that the human body is very beautiful as well. And so that impacts things because of the way that social mores seem to work. Or social mores, I have a hard time pronouncing that word. But basically like community morality standards sort of thing. So I'm very conscious about the fact that most of society seems to view nudity negatively, which I'm like, okay. Like I have over here, they're not going to go on camera, but I have some reproductions of some sculptures that I saw in a public square I couldn't tell you what city, but in Italy. My family, like I was privileged to go on a trip with my family to Europe in 2013, and it pains me that that's going to be a decade next year. But anyway, and so there's like, oh, here's a statue, just in a public space that has just like, yep, those people are naked. And it's like, okay. America in particular is got some weird thoughts, in my opinion, about nudity. But I want to include nudity in a lot of my works. And so this is why there's been no videos on Psychopomps Are Missing. And part of what I think caused Astral Collision to spiral out is I was trying to stay away from anything related to sexuality and nudity in Astral Collision to try to make it what I thought would be safe for public consumption, safe for YouTube. But ultimately, those topics and those things are like too important to me as who I am for some reason. And like I'm also very deeply religious, which also creates a lot of feeling of conflict, because I'm like, okay, I'm really passionate about like sexuality and I find it really interesting. And I think the human body is beautiful and it's my favorite artistic subject. But then also like I'm really religious and it doesn't jive with a lot of American Christian culture. So it's like, it puts me in this tension spot. And you're going to kind of see that come up as I kind of go through this. But like whenever I pray about why do I like vulva so much, and like God says it's to my glory, and I'm like, I don't see how, but okay, cool. So I've avoided a lot of stuff because of a lot of those like, oh, you can't allow nudity in public spaces sort of thing. So Astral Collision, I tried to avoid all of that because I wanted to make a YouTube series about it, but ultimately not including those sorts of elements meant that it was like, it had a lot of other problems. This wasn't the only one. I've gone over them in detail in various forums, but ultimately, because it excluded those things, it wasn't true to who I am in a way that meant that I just lost interest. Like I didn't have sort of that internal like interest. Again, that's not the only factor. There are a lot of other key ones. Psychopomps Are Missing has a much, much better design foundation it's built on too, but it does include those like nudity elements. It's not a sex game by any means. It's more like there's just going to be nudist stuff in it, and that's just like how it's going to be. I feel like that leaves it into this weird spot where like not being a sex game means that it doesn't appeal to the people who are interested in those, but including nudity makes it feel like it doesn't appeal to the people who don't like sex games. Maybe, like, hopefully I'm wrong on some of this. It's just, that's how it kind of feels. As I'm trying to, like, find my community and all of this. So, anyway, that's part of why I've not made videos on Psychopomps Are Missing, is because, like, there's one of the main characters, she's just always naked. Like, that's just who she is, and because I wanted to have that, and then there's this concept of Doyleist and Watsonian that comes from Sherlock Holmes, where the Sherlock Holmes stories in universe are told by Watson, but they're written in real life by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So you have the Doyleist perspective, which is, okay, this is from the actual author, and then the Watsonian perspective is the in-universe explanation. So, like, there's a Watsonian explanation for why things are the way that they are with her, and it's mechanically reinforced by the fact that she can't wear normal armor, she can only use enchantments and stuff. I always want things to be mechanically backed up as much as I can, because to me, mechanics are what make the game real. But anyway, I've not included stuff because of that, or I've not like made any YouTube videos because of that on it. Although that's one of the things that I want to investigate is like, okay, what are YouTube's actual policies on this? Because I've realized that I feel like I'm kind of running on assumptions here a little bit. So anyway, sex ed is something that's really important to me. I want people to understand how the reproductive systems work. I want people to be aware of those and all of that sort of thing. This is not something for me to do, but I do want to promote others. So, like, Mama Dr. Jones is a YouTube channel that's significantly larger than mine. So I don't have no particular benefit to plugging her for her, but she's a channel that's talked about a lot of sex ed stuff, particularly she's an OBGYN, so particularly gynecological sex ed stuff. So, for example, promoting her stuff to the extent that anything that I do matters, and that sort of thing, which it might be weird to hear that a Christian is in favor of good sex education, but here we are. I am in favor of good sex education, and I think it is a shame that the United States does such an abysmal job on this, because the thing is, it's not just like soapbox, stepping on it. It's not just a matter of like, what are safe sex practices? You're dispelling speculation. It's important to give people good and accurate information so they're not getting it from poor sources. Kids want to know, so you want to make sure that you're providing a safe environment, an educational environment where they're going to get accurate information. And like, I had an analogy. Yeah. It's like, you don't want people to be getting their sex ed from porn, because, like, for the same reason you don't want them to try to learn how to drive by watching Fast and Furious. Like, that's not what they're made for. They're a different thing entirely. So, and it should include a lot of other information too, like what changes are going to happen to your body, what's normal, what's not, when should you seek things out, and all sorts of stuff, and like research into. Anyway, let's get off the soapbox. Let's continue on. Sexuality, again, I said this is something I'm passionate about. This is something that I can include in my works, potentially write about, and promote others too. So, like, there will definitely be discussions and discussions of sexuality and stuff in Psychopomps Are Missing, as well as terrible puns, because I like puns. Remember, stay hydrated, everyone. But again, I don't want to make. My point isn't to make stuff about sex itself. Like, I'm not trying to make stuff that, but I want to include like the human nature, or like sexuality, I feel like I've made that point already, so I'm just going to keep moving on. Censorship of nudity. This is something that's important to me. It matters a lot. Everybody has a body, and the fact that we treat like we treat the naked body as if it's somehow reserved for like I don't know. The way that we treat it is just very weird to me. And also, I feel as a byproduct of the modern era, where we like particularly in wealthy countries where we're able to afford private spaces, like we're able to hide nudity in a way that you couldn't in the past. Like and like the way like people didn't either. So anyway, yeah, censorship of nudity is something that really matters a lot to me. It's a very difficult thing. It really is because like I can understand some elements of it and then some go too far. And there's recently actually at the time of recording, and probably when this comes out, Adidas did an advertisement on Twitter where it's like, here's a bunch of like topless women with like our sports bras will support all of this wide diversity. And it's like, yeah, these are real normal breasts. And it's like definitely the seeing some of the tweets on that is like, okay, this is some weird backlash and stuff. And it's just like, I want to press against, as I say, the censorship of nudity. And part of that requires me to be courageous and to say, okay, I'm going to be putting stuff out there that I'm worried about how people are going to respond because I have a fear of judgment. Because I realized, and I wrote about this on my blog, so I'll try to give just the Cliff Notes short version. But I have a people pleaser tendency as a defense mechanism where I believe that if I'm pleasing to somebody else, then they won't hurt me emotionally or otherwise. And so I have a people pleaser personality where I want to try to figure out what is going to be pleasing to this person so that way I can present a version of myself to them that's not going to be offensive to them. And so what I end up doing is like I basically censor parts of myself. And I have to work past that to be courageous, especially because the fear of like mobs to an extent, and others who wield like power to do moral policing. I have a very strong anti-authoritarian streak because of this in particular. But anyway, so that requires a courage. But this is kind of like an important thing to me, which is why big focus. I'm not 100% certain about like what this means or whatever, which is why there's a question mark. And then it's something for me to try to press against. And then another thing that I'm passionate about is the state of Christianity in America. And as I was kind of working through these were all like work through them, pray about them. I'm trying to understand from God what should be my posture towards each of these, right? And so this was very much like a prayer-driven, introspective process of working through the self-assessment document. So I feel very concerned about the state of Christianity in America. I think Christian nationalism is something that I'm deeply concerned about. If you go into Geekdom of God, which is an old series of videos I did on Christian theology, you'll see an early one, and there's a playlist. Maybe I'll try to remember to include a link to that as well. But I'm having to remember too many things. But the heresy of Christian nationalism is a very early video that I did in my Geekdom of God series. It's something that I'm very concerned about. It's something that, and to kind of explain Christian nationalism, Cliff Notes version, hopefully here, it's where Christianity becomes a feature of culture and is more, to use a word my sister likes, suborned by cultural political elements. And so what you end up having is people have their culture. Instead of deriving their values from the Bible, which, for example, promotes welfare and acceptance of foreigners and things. Like if you look at Leviticus, there are bits where it's like, oh yeah, rules. Every 7 years, all debt was canceled that Israelites held over their fellow Israelites. You had like people who own farms, so wealthier people who own farmable land, or anybody who owned farmable land, they weren't allowed to like completely harvest their fields. They had to be kind of spotty on it because the unharvested parts that they missed basically were to be left for the poor and foreigners to be able to harvest to have food. So there's kind of like a welfare system baked into it. And like they were commanded several times in the ancient Israelites were commanded several times to be welcoming to foreigners. If we're taking biblical values, like one of the other big ones is like taking care of laborers, like they had to be paid on time and stuff like that. So it's actually a lot of values that today would be in America would be associated with the political left. So anyway, if you're not taking your values from the Bible, what instead you have a set of cultural values, and like for example, the Bible never says that nudity is evil or anything like that. It is associated with shame, but that I think is like clothing. I think is a metaphor for the shame of sin, where we try to hide that shame, and so Adam and Eve's sin, where they were kicked out of the garden. Originally, they were naked and they were unashamed, and that's because they didn't feel that they had anything to hide. But like the prophet Isaiah, it's really easy to gloss over, but he went around completely naked for 3 years, as like commanded by God. Like there's nothing morally wrong about nudity, but a lot of people will make something be morally wrong about nudity through cultural stuff and then try to find some sort of justification for it. So Christian nationalists will have some sort of like they'll combine patriotic things with religion that tends to be very theocratic in nature. They tend to be authoritarian. They terrify me. And like the United States was founded by a bunch of Christians fleeing persecution from other Christians. It's bonkers. And the other thing with Christian nationalists, as I was trying to get to and I keep wobbling around, is they have cultural values that they try to use the Bible to justify. So you'll see where in the past it's like, oh, we are trying to find some way to justify slavery using the Bible, and things like that. And that gets a little bit complicated because the way slavery has been practiced throughout history has varied a little bit in times and places, but it's one of those things where they've tried to use it to advocate for to try to make miscegenation illegal, which is people of different race. I'm not going to get off tangent here, but different races marrying each other, and it's like, okay, you're trying to justify this, but you're taking verses out of context to try to do it and that sort of thing. So you get a lot of that sort of thing where it's like, okay, we have our cultural values that we really like and we're trying to justify them. I've gone way too long on Christian nationalism, but something that I'm deeply concerned about is extremely prevalent in the United States of America, where you have kind of the God and guns sort of crowd, which are most likely going to be Christian nationalists, because the Bible never says anything about having a right to guns. So what I feel like I'm supposed to do here is pray about it. I'm supposed to show love and compassion. I think there's a lot of people who are stuck in this mindset because it's a cultural thing. And I want to be compassionate towards them. Because my default sort of like, these people are damaging the reputation of Christ with the way that they're trying to like shove their cultural values down people's throat, claim that the Bible supports it, and then try to legislate morality. I have huge problems with that. But I want to try to have a soft position posture, not antagonistic. This is very contrary to like how I feel, but this is how I want to behave. Because again, like Christian nationalism, I think is actively damaging the cause of Christ, actively damaging the perception of the church, and is obsessed with like political power and stuff. I feel hugely negative about it. But that doesn't mean that individual people and individual churches, like, it's too messy to paint with the singular brush because there's too many cultural elements and cultural forces and like indoctrination and things happening. Understanding of Jesus is another thing that I'm really passionate about. I want people to understand who Jesus is. I want to take a step back because at this point, some of you may be wondering, how is this going to impact my game design? And like, yeah, my games are going to be designed from my like Christian perspective, but I really want to avoid preaching. I don't think preaching is ever useful in a fictional work. There will be parallel elements. My biggest desire is not to preach, is to just present a perspective for people to consider. And I'm not going to make explicitly Christian works. That's not my desire. That's not my interest. I am going to use it as kind of a model, kind of how a lot of Japanese stuff will use Buddhism or Shintoism as like models for their world. Like there's a lot of Shintoism built into Pokemon, for example, a franchise I quite enjoy overall. Like there's a lot of Shintoism built into that. There's a lot of like Sekiro presents Buddhism and has that in it. And you're going to get a lot of those religious elements baked into it because it's part of their culture and stuff. My Christianity is really important to who I am. It frames the way that I understand things about the world. And so a lot of my games are going to have recurrent themes based upon that. But I never want them to be preaching. Gameplay is extremely important. When John Romero says gameplay is king, I'm inclined to agree with him. The game has to be fun to play. It has to be an engaging game. And anything that's in it that's trying to advocate a position or make a point needs to fit naturally into the game and needs to be more about presenting a perspective, not trying to preach a perspective, not trying to preach something. So I just wanted to take a moment to discuss that. And anybody who's still with me, I thank you very much. I know this has been very long. So that's what I mean by include in works. Like, it's going to be baked into things. I feel like a lot of what I wanted to say about this in more explicitly has been done with Geekdom of God. I don't feel that I have a whole lot that I need to explicitly be adding to that, so a lot of it's going to be other things. And I say when I micro pray here, which is just a very short prayer, I get nothing more to do here vocationally. I feel like, okay, I'm done trying to explain who Jesus is in this sort of like explicit sense in a large form. Obviously, I'm happy to do it with individuals. But in terms of if anybody has any questions, but in terms of a large forum, I've done it with Geekdom of God. Those are out there. They exist. They probably need new thumbnails because as thumbnails are and new titles. That's on my to-do list. I don't know when I'm going to get to it because I need to rewatch all of the videos to make sure I'm capturing everything properly. So anyway, I feel like I've done this with Geekdom of God. I don't need to do more here. And I also have this note. Critically, I should be careful about trying to correct people in this regard, to correct people's understanding of Jesus. One of the things that I've come to really appreciate is how important it is to be humble here and to recognize everybody has their own perspective. And to recognize that my perspective, my interpretations, I need to hold as maybe authoritative to myself, but I shouldn't try to force them on others because that's been happening a lot. And I don't think it's helpful. Who am I to say that my interpretations are correct? Who am I to say that my interpretations are correct for someone else? So I need to be very, very humble in that regard. And so this is exactly why I say I should be careful about trying to correct people in this regard. That also just tends to be very antagonistic, and it's not helpful for furthering a good conversation or getting to people to think because it puts them in a defensive state where they're not receptive. Okay, so I'm going to have to discuss this one in a little bit more detail in a bit. The poor and disadvantaged is something else I'm very passionate about. A lot of it has to do with where I've been at. You can see this is something for me to advocate for, that we do better by the poor and disadvantaged, to pray for the poor and disadvantaged. But I need to not center it on myself. And I say I'm way better off than I feel. And while my experiences have given me space for sympathy and empathy, I am not in those circumstances. So I'm trying to figure out which piece of context to give first. So I'm living at home. I get along very well with my family. I'm very blessed in that regard. I have a lot of privilege in that sense. I don't have to worry about rent. I do have to worry about living expenses, which are relatively low. So, in this regard, I'm in an extremely privileged position. On the other hand, I am also not making very much money with the things that I'm doing. So I don't feel like I have any disposable income, which is very frustrating and very limiting. It makes it feel like I can't really do things that would be potentially helpful or otherwise Like I can't upgrade my computer. I would like to stream Elden Ring when that comes out, and like fortunately, like from birthday gift stuff, I was able to get Elden Ring pre-ordered, but I can't stream it because, or at least I'm very hesitant to try to stream it because I don't think my graphics card, which is fairly old at this point, can handle it. Like both playing the game and streaming it. So it's like, okay, I would have liked to have been able to upgrade this at some point in time, but it's something that feels outside of my reach. So I also need to not center on myself though, because I am like overall, like I have a positive net worth. That's not something many people like that. I feel like I have more wealth than I feel like I do, while my income itself is actually fairly low. Like I'm not super wealthy or anything, but having a positive net worth makes me feel like I have more like wealth than it like wealth and liquid money are two very different things. So anyway, I have been very low income, like no disposable income. I have felt that like worry of like, okay, how am I going to meet my expenses this next month? And just the low living expenses that I have. Again, I'm in a privileged position, and I don't want to lose sight of that. That's why I need to not center it on myself. So just to kind of like wrap this up, this is why like getting my Patreon up to 300 kind of dollars a month will allow me to cover those monthly expenses and basically kind of extend my runway. Ultimately, that needs to get up to like a $15 per hour minimum wage worked at full time is $30,000 a year. USD, obviously, 15. All of these monetary values are in USD. That's $2,500 a month. So getting up to that sort of threshold would be really, really nice. I think that would require around 500 to 600 patrons at an average of $5 per month. From what I was looking at the math the other day, and the range there is because the accounting for the Patreon's fee, which I've been on there long enough. I was grandfathered into the older program, so I think my fees are around 8%. I'd have to double check that. It's a little complicated, but so like that's just being very clear on money things. That like the 300 is around 60-ish, 60, a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit over 60 people on an average of $5 per month because there's a little sliver taken out, which like perfectly understandable. They're providing me a platform. I've made a bajillion posts on there and all that sort of stuff. So I don't begrudge them in any way in that, and it's way better than like Twitch's split, for example. Anyway, I'd like to get up to that to cover those living expenses because that feels like, okay, this is going somewhere. But it obviously would need to get much higher to be an amount of income that's actually hitting like the minimum wage people are advocating for, $15 an hour. So again, I don't want to center some of this stuff on myself. I don't think I'm the right person for that, but I can definitely advocate for the poor and disadvantaged. I'm for universal health care for a myriad reasons. I'm for universal basic income. I think those are both very beneficial policies that give people more negotiating power when they're trying to find employment. Let's move on. Something else I'm passionate about are those that have been hurt by the Christian church. There's just been a lot of people that have been hurt by the church. It's unfortunate. I think Christian nationalism is a big driver of that pain. But to a lot of people, what's the difference between a Christian who isn't a Christian nationalist and a Christian who is a Christian nationalist? Or prosperity gospel is another common heresy in the U.S. And around the world, because unfortunately the U.S. is very good at exporting its culture. So what do I do about those who have been hurt by the church? I need to be compassionate and love. I need to empathize. I need to not dismiss or be dismissive of hurts or claim not all churches, etc. and I just need to be there, be a friend and a listener. It isn't my job to heal or fix. That's Jesus' job. So, again, you'll see a lot of the stuff around the things that Christianity is just like a very soft sort of position. This is one of those things where, like, I think people who have been hurt in churches, that there are other churches out there that don't do the thing that hurt them. But that has no bearing whatsoever on the fact that they were in a church that did hurt them. And just saying not all is like, okay, that has no bearing on their pain. And one of the things I'm trying to learn and get better at is to just recognize that pain needs to be worked through and to not try to just instantly fix it. I feel like in American culture, we try really hard to ignore others' pain and to try to find reasons to dismiss it, to not grieve with them. But one of those biblical values is to grieve with those who grieve. And to bear one another's burdens doesn't mean that we evaporate their burden. It means that we go down there with them where their pain is, where their struggles are. We help them with what they're going through. And often one of the biggest ways to help is to listen there and to just express empathy, compassion, and love, and to give them what they need because they're asking for it. You know, they're like, somebody who's grieving will know what sort of what they need at that moment, and most of the time it's just somebody to tell them, yeah, this sucks, and to be there with them in their grief. So this is something where it's like, those who are hurt by the Christian church, I need to be compassionate and love towards them, etc. I don't need to repeat these. So this is kind of like the list of the self-assessment. These are like the things I was doing, the things I'm passionate about, and sort of the responses that as I was working through this, praying about it and thinking about it and all that sort of stuff, where I ended up having responses. So this is kind of, I felt it was really important to share this, as this is a big life update. It's impacting sort of the work that I'm trying to do and stuff. Hopefully I can wrap this up in under an hour. So anyway, that kind of covers this document, what I wanted to talk about. As you can see, I am a complicated human being with a lot of different things going on, a lot of different perspectives on stuff. And just to kind of wrap things up, if you want to see or hear more with me, or you want to contact me, again, and there will be links to these in the description. My Discord is like the best way to like message me. You can go to my Discord server. There's a link down below. You can go to my blog at santier.com to see what I've written there. Twitter is a good way of getting like random thoughts and things like that. So that's at twitter.com/santier. I'm trying to be my authentic self there. And of course, my Patreon is like the best way of kind of keeping up what's going on at that $5 tier. But I recognize not everybody can afford that tier. I understand that. You can just follow. I do usually post updates there when like a new article or sometimes like when new non-VOD videos come out on my YouTube channel and things like that, new blog posts. I will have public things go out on my Patreon as well, so you can follow my Patreon if you want that for like getting emailed notifications on those things. Anything else? I feel like that covers most of it. Just to run through the list again for my sake. Twitter, my website, my Discord, and my Patreon. So, and the other thing is, if you want to support me and you can't financially support me, sharing my content with somebody that you think will enjoy it helps a lot. Word of mouth is the most powerful form of marketing, and any creator that you want to support in a non-financial way, sharing their work helps so much. It gets around algorithmic nonsense, and that growth organically through word of mouth is extremely powerful, and is a very valuable thing that you can give someone, because you're basically, instead of giving them money directly, you're giving them marketing, which is, as you can see by our ad-driven internet, extremely valuable. So thank you all very much for watching. Thank you for your time. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join me on this as I share what's going on. I do want to do one of these again at some point next month as well, in March, just kind of update where things are at. We'll see what that is at that time, and what other things may come down the road. So some things that I'm looking at is like, what exactly is YouTube's policy about nudity? Can I upload videos about psychopomps are missing when I would describe its nudity as non-sexual? Can I like actually make some videos about it? If I look through and I'm like, okay, yes, this is something that I can do, those will go up. Like that's something that I might make and post, but that's currently in a to be determined state. I don't know. I'm just trying to make sure I covered all the things I wanted to discuss, so I'm getting things out of my brain. I'm trying to make sure I've caught all of the like threads that I set up at the beginning. So yeah, okay, that's gonna wrap things up. Let's get this in just under an hour. Again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, everyone, take care and goodbye.